All right, welcome again, everyone. And go ahead, panelists. You can feel free to introduce yourselves.
None of us know who to start. I'm Jody Fick. I'm currently director of Siouxland Libraries, and I was sharing with Kara a little bit my history. I started with the Minnehaha County Library back in 1990, and then Siouxland was created with the merger of Minnehaha and Sioux Falls in 95, and I continued with it and progressively lots of different roles. But we have 13 locations, and during that time, I have moved some of them 3 times. We've built from scratch, I think 3 locations. We've done a lot of renovation. And speaking in terms of size, from the downtown libraries around 90,000 square feet, all the way down to working with one of my branches that's 400 square feet. So lots of different experience.
I'm Kara Perrian. I'm the assistant director at the Keole Aberdeen Public Library. Been very fortunate that we have a new build, even though we still feel like it's new. We've been here about 5 years. I've been here 25 years, and so I've been through a lot. I guess it was remodeling, but it was really more repair. And that brought us to a new structure, and it was kind of a long process, but I learned a lot, and so did our community. So we're really excited about sharing what we learned and kind of the whole process and everything. So yeah.
I'm Betty Jean Mertens, and I don't think you can see my face, but I'm at the Kennebec Library, Public Library. I am the chairman of Library Board. I've been involved with the library for a lifetime, and as years went by, as we got more and more involved with trying to get our customers to come in, we were sharing our library with the town board secretary. So we'd lost some librarians, and she was just taking over and doing the library job. So we really didn't have a librarian. And when books came in, they just sat in boxes, and it was a big mess. So we wanted to get out of that building, and we decided to take on the mammoth job of building a new site in Kennebec. And so that was in 1991. We got that job finished. And so it's been a long time ago, but I don't know that, I'm hoping that I can be helpful to smaller libraries, because it was a big goal that we had, and we met it. So that was really an accomplishment for our little town of 300, and that's pushing it.
I'm Scotty Brook. I'm currently the school library coordinator for the South Dakota State Library, but before this, I was the head librarian in the Meade School District. So that was Sturgis Brown High School, Sturgis Middle School, and then the new Stage Barn Middle School when it was built. So I got to be in on the process of that new build of that library, which was sort of designed to be the center and the focal point of the school, which was really cool. So I got to sit in on a lot of design meetings and do all of the book ordering and supply ordering and furniture ordering. And then about halfway through the first year at Stage Barn, I was told that the library was going to be removed from its location for a STEM lab to be put in it. So I got to move that brand new library into a teeny tiny classroom in that brand new school. So I got to be part of both, I guess, the rebuild and then the moving of an entire library into a different location. And then the next year at my middle school in Sturgis, we had a remodel to take away about half of the library for a STEM lab. And so again, another movement of a library or, part of a library into another part of a library. So just kind of a different experience, I think, on my end being in the schools, but hopefully I can at least offer some success and failures and sort of my ideas that I had for ordering.
Great. And Dan, we haven't heard from you yet.
Okay. Well, first, good morning, everybody. And Brenda, thanks so much for the invitation to join the panel. I currently serve as the Dean of Libraries at USD, and those responsibilities include our main campus library, ID Weeks, which is where I'm at today, our Health Sciences Library, Wagner Health Sciences Library up in Sioux Falls, and I live in Sioux Falls and kind of split my week between the Vermilion and Sioux Falls. And likewise, we provide online library services throughout the state. We also provide medical library services to Stanford, Avera, the VA, SDSU, USF, and Mount Marty. We kind of have, I would say, our current space configuration is 4 locations. 2 libraries, library services out on the west side of Sioux Falls at the USD Sioux Falls campus. And then we share a preservation center here in Vermilion with the National Music Museum. I did not, like probably most people, ever intend to go into library leadership and administration. I'm an archivist and special collections librarian by training. I entered the academic libraries in '93 in that field. But a good friend of mine was responsible for helping me think through a really large life change for my spouse and I. Asked if I would serve as library director at Northwestern College in Orange City, Iowa. And my wife's is also an academic. So we made that move with our 3 children in 2003. And that really kind of launched, well, one, the current kind of role in terms of leadership and administration, but also building projects. I was actually specifically hired to lead a building project at Northwestern. And since then, I've kind of been involved in multiple building projects, renovation projects, some that have gone and some that ended up being put in the file cabinet, basically. There's some learning experiences there. So just looking forward to hearing what the other panelists say and your questions, and maybe I can share a few insights from about the last 20 years, I guess.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So let's start with a question about the fundraising part of it, and if there was a community fundraising, or did you have to get community support? And I'll just go ahead and call on people. So Kara, would you share your experience in that realm?
We did have to do fundraising, and a majority of it was through fundraising. Of course, the city also, it was almost half and half. And what we started was a campaign, and we had somebody on our board who does marketing and publicity in his real life. And he took it on himself. I can't stress enough having a variety of people on a board, and then seeing the need for either remodel, like for us, it was a lot of times repairs, but to get that new building, because some of our really great people on the board decided that they were going to leave the board, but get elected, try really hard, and they got elected to the city council. So we knew we had an in there. At least we could, maybe if it went to vote, which ours eventually did. But for fundraising, we did this huge campaign. And one thing too, our board was very, I guess, they understood that no matter if we got a new library or anything, the staff still had to work for the city and work for the community. And, sometimes these things really divide communities. So they were we're going to take all the hits. We're going to take on all these things, and you guys still just do an amazing job. Just keep doing your job. Because at the end of the day, you are a library beyond your building. It's not just your building. So they were really great that way. I think that's what kind of led to the success at that time. They've tried many times. But anyway, so we did a Beyond Books. So this would have been, gosh, I think this would have been about 2010. They kind of started 2008, then 2010, and it was this huge campaign. And, it was, videos and flyers and it just everywhere people saw us, it was Beyond Books. And all our programming, everything we did was we want to be that community center, as most of you are, and now we are, but to convince the non-readers in your community to maybe write that check or, leave us that money in their will or whatever it is, that they were doing really big fundraising in that way. They also did smaller fundraising, but they really focused on pledges and the future. They focused on the future and where we could go. So that was really great. And I know a couple other libraries in like Wisconsin, when they were going through that, they contacted us and they didn't have somebody on their board like that, but their board ended up hiring a marketing and publicity company who kind of, I guess their focus is fundraising for nonprofits. And so it's kind of hard to convince maybe your board, we're trying to raise money, why are we spending money? But there's no way we would have been able to raise so the 3 million just from donations. It might have been almost 4 million just from donations. We would never have been able to do that. And sometimes people like to hear it from an outside party, not from the people on the board or the staff or anything like that. And it was nice because none of the staff had to ask for a dime. In fact, we never even really talked about it. And it was all the people in the community doing it. And I had been through others years before that, and it just bombed, and it was awful. And what the staff had to go through with the people who were very against libraries and anybody should spend any money on a library and books are going away. We've all heard it, right? And we lost some really great people from the profession because, not everybody's really nice when it comes down to fundraising and buildings, and everybody has their own ideas. And so I thought that was so great because it was much more positive, and it was much more positive spin to the community.
Right, great. I'm just going to kind of go in order of who I see on my screen here. And Jody, you are the next one.
We've had such a variety of things. In all of our libraries outside of Sioux Falls, the buildings are provided by the community that they're in. So for those, the very much community driven, often a group of moms who said, this library is just too small. And I said, you need to talk with your city council. And the city council would say, okay, if you want something more, we need you to be raising the funds, give them permission, and then get going and start that momentum. And it could take years, but it really was very much grassroots for what they had. In Brandon, we ended up with a joint high school public library that was on the front of the building. That project was opened up in 2002. The cost of the add-on was just over 1.2 million. About half of the funding did come from grants from both the state and the federal level, because once the moms got organized and got the city and the school district on board, they also then talked with their different politicians and legislatures and talked about the importance of this for the growth of their community. Let's see, in Sioux Falls, when we've done our bigger ones, those ended up being funded from quality of life bonds. Often in Sioux Falls, they get attached with other major projects, so that in the case of like the downtown library in Prairie West, we also had a major pool or a park that needed to be built or a fire station. so that the citizens are voting on a joint project that we're moving forward with. So in Sioux Falls, it's more convincing and identifying the need and planning well in advance, because we're trying to keep up with population growth and having the right facilities. But we still have to do that justification as to our libraries still needed. And as all of you, we evolve with what the community needs and try to be responsive to that. So Friday,
Great.
but we've had the bake sales, all of that, it all helps.
For sure, definitely. Dan.
I would say that what's kind of connected my role with funding, whether it's new builds or renovations, kind of across my career, is being the person who kind of takes the all the data from our students, from our faculty, our staff, whether it was at Northwestern or here at USD, and working with key individuals, could be from the faculty, could be from the administration, could be also from the library faculty and staff, to really create the vision, and then to take that vision to the folks who are going to do the funding, basically. So like at Northwestern, that was really working with the president, taking that vision to the president and the college trustees through the course of a couple years. And I want to come back to the Northwestern project in just a minute. Here at USD, it's been really more on the renovation side at ID Weeks and Wagner. And that's really primarily been University and Board of Regents funding. So then it's really our CFO kind of selling the taking my vision and selling it to the state, basically, in terms of funding. The Northwestern project was really interesting in funding, because it kind of relates to kind of more bigger economic things that can happen. So I kind of literally had to hit the ground running in 2003 when I started the position to kind of really build the vision and the plan for the library. That took a couple of years of just a lot of consultations with lots of folks. And the president, starts going out to do the fundraising and decides that he's nearing the end of his career, and decides that he doesn't really like fundraising. A great guy. And so then we get a new president, and then the recession hits, and the project literally stalls at that point. And I was wanting to get back into archives, so I took the position over here at USD, got pulled back into administration. But I watched a project keep its the core values and the core concepts and ideas, because we had built a really solid vision. And then when the next president really had to come and sell that, he had to kind of downscale it and then sell it still to the funders, private individuals primarily. It really kind of was it showed me that what we had done collectively, faculty, staff, librarians, that what we've conceived kind of could stand on the test of almost 8 or 9 years across a project. So I guess my thing here is persevere in cases. So.
Right, thank you. Scotty, you're next up on my list.
Yeah, as far as community support, it was a new build of a school, so that was supported from the beginning, and there was a pretty healthy budget for furniture and shelving and materials. But for books, really what it came down to is I figured we had enough budget to fill about half of the new shelves. And so our fundraising was all about books and, actually having books in the library when it opened. And so it was a lot of outreach to parents the year before. I know we did a book fair at the local elementary school. I think it was a Scholastic book fair, but the parents could either donate money there or they could purchase books from the book fair to donate to the new library. We did a book drive where parents could also, you know, donate new or gently used books for either the library itself or for the classroom libraries. And then we also did a lot of transferring of books. And I don't know, you know, in the public library world, how well this would work, but just within our own district, I was able to go out to the other libraries in our school or in our district and find out, you know, what they had duplicates of, and if they were willing to transfer a duplicate over to the new library. And just so we could, you know, offset some of those costs as well of getting books on the shelves, because everything else was pretty well funded by the school except for those books. And so it was really a lot of book fairs and book drives and transfer of books at that point.
All right. Thank you, Scotty, for that school perspective. Terry Davis has joined us from Rapid City Public Library. And Terry, you've probably figured out we're talking about, the first question is, how did you get your funding and your community support?
Don't throw things at me. When I was looking to raise funds for the addition at the Deadwood Library, granted, this was in the 90s and costs were much less than they are now. We had a total project cost estimate of $300,000. And I was talking to some of our funders who had given small amounts over the years, pitching the project to them, asking them if they would provide seed money for the project. And I had an idea of between $30,000 and $50,000 in my mind. After I spoke with them, they removed themselves, had a little conversation between the two of them, and then came back and asked if I would mind very much if they funded the entire project. All they wanted was that it be named for the benefactor. And, you know, frankly, in my mind, I would have called it Fred if they'd wanted us to. So yeah, that was a very happy circumstance. I think is probably a once in a lifetime occurrence. The addition we built on the Rapid City Library in 2002 came primarily, that was a $3 million project. That came primarily through a fund that the city has called the Vision Fund, which is intended for city enhancement projects. It's the, I think the second penny of the sales tax or something. And so those have to be applied for well in advance, and they were, and our funding was available in 2001. We opened in 2002. We had a commitment of $2.5 million from the Vision Fund. So we were $500,000 short of our budget. So we had to commit to raising $500,000 to match that. We fortunately have a library foundation, and particularly the folks who were involved at that time had pretty deep pockets themselves and had a lot of friends with very deep pockets, were very focused and active within the community and did a lot of fundraising. And they actually came up with $600,000 to meet the match. So we've had pretty happy circumstances. The branch libraries we had were joint use facilities with the school district. So the schools took care of all of the bricks and mortar costs, and we provided equipment and materials. So that was minimal impact. And then we don't currently have a branch, but we are planning for it in the future with the cities. The city is starting to work on revising their master plan. And I've had preliminary conversations with the planning folks to include a library branch in that, possibly as a joint facility with another city entity. So that will make fundraising easier at that point because it is a joint facility, and the inherent cost savings in building one building instead of two. So yeah, I've been fortunate to have some happy circumstances happen in terms of fundraising.
Great, thank you. And Betty, want to share your experiences?
Okay, well, we're just a little town, so a friend and I decided that we wanted to take it upon ourselves to encourage a new library building with the setup that we had at the time. And so it was really from the ground up, and we went in to see if we could find some grants, just through the government, federal government and state government. Well, if you don't have a big community, or you don't have a big business that's in your community, those are pretty hard to come by. So then we had to go back to, okay, what can our town do for us? Well, our city was very supportive, but they didn't have any extra money. And so they just said, go for it, and see what you can do. So it was a lot of PR things, we had to talk a lot to community members and library supporters, people that came to the library a lot. And in those days, sometimes there wasn't a lot of extra money, that people had. But we were lucky enough to have a person, because we'd published it in the newspaper, and she still got the newspaper, but didn't live here and hadn't for years. And so she gave us some land to put the library on. So that was kind of where we got started, is now we have a spot, it's going to happen. And then another lady that lived in town had a lot right next to her, so she gave us her lot. So now we have an area that's really big enough to put down a building that's worthy, and then we kind of decided that maybe we needed to evolve, like they were talking about, not having non-library supporting people in your community. And that seemed to be the way it was. There was a little small group that came out every day or all week or whatever, and then nobody else really showed up. So we tried to get something that would encourage others to start coming into our library and seeing that it is an important thing in a community. And so then we decided that instead of making the whole building a library, we would use like a third of it and make it into a community center. And because that was a need we had in our town too. And once we did that, we started getting way more support from the community. And that's when we started getting big chunks of money, and when I say big, I think our whole project was $80,000, which is a lot to a little town in those days. Now it's nothing, couldn't do anything with that. But we had a thermometer sitting out in the front, and we would always have to keep it updated and stuff. And then we have a plaque that if you gave over, I think it was over $100, then you could get your name put on this plaque. Probably cost us more to engrave the plaque than it did what we got. But that worked too, because people, they gave way more than $100 sometimes, we had fundraisers and those went over, but you don't make a whole lot of money that way. And then we got a grant from the state. And so that was very helpful. With that grant though came a lot of extra expenses, because you have to have an architect and you have to have all of it, passing different codes and that kind of thing, which we didn't start out to be that big. We weren't going to involve an architect for sure. But if we wanted the money, that was the deal, And I think when people saw that we were searching outside of our community and actually had received a grant, then they felt like, yeah, this is going to happen. I need to be a part of this too. And so the money started coming in, and pretty soon there we got it. So we were pretty happy.
Very good. All right. I'm looking at the time and it's 10:35. So I think I want to move into just kind of the general advice from all of you. And if you have things to put in the chat, we will be saving that. I see Jody has put in a little piece about space planning, which is a good thing. So I kind of want to move into advice, tips, tricks from our panelists? If you, the attendees are doing this, what kind of advice would you give them? And also, Betty mentioned architects. Did you work with an architect? Who was it? Was it local? If you have recommendations for those on the call today, that would be helpful. So yeah, just take a 2-3 minutes, 2-4 minutes. So if we can squeak by with some time at the end for questions. And folks who are attending, if you would also like to put any questions in chat, feel free to do that and we can try and address those. So I'm going to pick on Jody first this time, since you put that helpful space planning sheet in the chat.
Yeah, in those little towns where it's like, how big to build it? It was like, I don't know, but I wanted to give them an idea, so I didn't end up with really small if they were going to go forward. So I've worked both with architects and without. If it's a bigger project, I really recommend having an architect. They see things, they know things that we are not trained to understand. You do need to have, there are some architects that are better about understanding the needs of a public library or of a library. So you need to be very vocal in where do you want your desks? What type of space do you need? What types of furnishings, so that especially if you're going into a new project, you want a library that serves people now, and not that library that architect might be remembering from their childhood or that romantic. You want a very functional space for your community. Most recently, we've worked with Architecture Inc. here in Sioux Falls. They're really good. Are my favorite architects to work with, and I will have to find their names and send them out to Brenda because I'm forgetting their name, but it was a firm out of Chicago that does libraries, and they did the design work. And then when it came to build, they coupled with an architect here in Sioux Falls. So when you're doing your build part, make sure that you have someone local if you've been working with someone outside, because you need that person on site who will be connecting with your contractor and making sure that things are done how you need them done. Let's see. I think that's it. One of the other ones that I worked with is no longer here. So, they do come and go. Yeah. So.
All right. Anyway. Perfect. Thank you. Let's move next to Scotty.
Yeah, I completely agree with Jody about being vocal, because you are the person who knows what you need in your space. And I know that I was really grateful to be a part of the process in the schools with building the new Stage Barn Middle School library, because we got to talk about things like, where should the circulation desk go? And I needed a workspace, and they were gracious enough to add that in, but then there were no windows looking out into the library. Just that lack of understanding that if I'm back in the workspace, I also need to be able to see the students in the library. And then just thinking about the spaces that you need. So how your library gets used, or how you want it to get used, all of the different little spaces that you can create. And then I think the really exciting part about either a build or a remodel is that you really just get to start fresh with everything. So thinking about furniture, and I know we ordered a lot of furniture on wheels so that we could rearrange that space as necessary. And we got to think a lot about shelf organization from the start. And so I know in that new library, we genreified the entire collection right from the start, because we were having to order all new books and put on all new spine labels anyway. And so it was just a good way to figure out how, looking at our other libraries in our district, how do they look for books, and how can we create this library from the start that really encourages browsing and really matches the needs of our students. And so, if you have other libraries in your community, or you have other libraries that you can reach out to, or you can look at your current library and really understand how your patrons are searching for books, you really have an opportunity to to do something great in a new space.
All right, great. Thank you. Let's see. Let's move to Kara.
So for us, part of our process, and we had a community study done, and sometimes that was just having areas all around the community where they could give us feedback of once it went to a vote, which some people thought was terrible. I, who do a lot of marketing and publicity for for the whole library, I was like, this is great, because when it went for a vote, it was like 65% voted yes, and so we could really push that this is what the community wants, and then a lot of other people got on board after that, a lot of the skeptics. So if it goes to a vote, or if there's some controversy like that, it could actually work in your favor. So don't worry too much about it, even though it's very stressful. But for us, we worked with an architect. We worked with somebody who was local, co-op architect, and then one of the reasons why the board and the city commission wanted that architect, because he also was going to partner with MSR from Minneapolis, who I think his name is Jack Poling, and his entire career was schools and public libraries. And his were very much for the future. It's not your grandpa's library. It's libraries for the future. And I'm so thankful that they were very instrumental, even for, there's just a few of us in the staff. It was the director and me who were ever asked or acknowledged about anything. But they kept pushing us as, okay, this is now, but you're in a really bad old building, and this isn't how your community is going to use your new library. What's the future? And so we really did a lot of research and looking at trends of what was the future. And that really helped us a lot. Nobody knew the pandemic was going to happen, but thank God we have one of those buildings that was, everything's on wheels and everything was movable, and it's, flexible. The space was flexible. You could do whatever you needed to with it, and that it was state of the art and move forward. And so we always try to kind of keep that momentum. And so that was great for me and my director, because it made us think of the future, that what is a library going to be, and what are we going to be for our community. But that was overwhelming, the information we got from our community study. And it might be just like going down to the coffee shop and asking people what they want in a library. I mean, it doesn't have to be like this big formal study, but for Aberdeen, in Brown County, that's what we needed. And so we had that to go forward. And just the trends and how you use a library now is not going to be what it's going to be in 3 years even. You used to be able to say 10, but it's not. And so flexibility, as flexible as you possibly can get your space, because even 5 years ago, how we use it now is different than when we first moved in. And so we worked with an architect. He was local. So it was very, everybody really wanted the town to prosper from it as well. So all the contractors, everybody was local as much as we could be. And so that was really great. But working with an architect who kind of knew, and then engineers, those are always great to work with too. And they helped a lot. And I think that was really instrumental. And any advice was to trust the people who have done this before, because there were many times where they were like, okay, these are your shelves and this is what you'll do. And I remember when they decided we had to get all new furniture, everything, and our staff chairs for our offices were $900 a piece. And they said, these are the best chairs you'll ever have, and you'll have to get these. And my director about fell over, and was like, no. But it went with it. It was in the budget. And also a lot of the furniture, it had to be that expensive, public grade, someone's going to stand on a table that's not going to break type of a thing. And I'm glad, because it's going to have to last a really long time. And we're open, 7 days a week. So at first we wanted to say, oh, no way, we can't do that. But we're always so used to those small budgets for a library. No matter what size, it's always a crunch. You never have enough money. So this is the time when you're fundraising, just do it the best that you possibly can, because you know, it'll be 10, 20 years before you'll get anything new again, and it has to last. So quality and working with somebody local, and that is, I think, the advice I would give.
All right, great. Terry.
Unfortunately, my experience in working with architects has not been quite so rosy as my fundraising experience. It's darn difficult to fire an architect, but if you need to, you need to. So we had to go through that once. What I realized is architects may seem like they're listening to you and hearing what you're saying, but they're really more interested in building monuments to themselves. And yeah, sometimes their ideas are just not practical for the library world. A couple of you mentioned working with architects that have library experience, and that's excellent, and I strongly recommend that. If you can't, however, and perhaps even in addition, try to find a library space planner that you can work with. You know, they're few and far between. You really have to look for them, but you can find them. And the benefit is they can help you frame things differently. I mean, we've talked about flexible space and needing to adapt for the future and future uses of libraries. And library space planners have a better sense of that than I think most architects do. And so working in collaboration, an architect with a space planner, you can get a really good project and one that you'll be proud of, your community or your school will be proud of, and will serve you well for many years to come, hopefully with the flexibility that you require.
Good point there. Thank you for that. Let's move to Dan and then Betty.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. I guess to echo, if you've got the opportunity to have both a local architect and a more regional or national architect who's got library experience with the kind of, whether it's academic or school or public, that's a great partnership. That's been a good experience when I was over at Northwestern. For renovation projects, both at Wagner and ID Weeks, our facilities office just has architects that they go to. So Architecture Inc. in Sioux Falls is great. It's been a good experience there. Co-op, likewise, has been a good experience. Relatively straightforward projects, really kind of librarian designed, and the architects in both those cases really listened to us. So I would recommend both firms if that's okay. I guess we certainly use them here at USD. Library space planners, interesting, that Terry brought up. University brought a space planner in who was an architect, but his business was space planning for higher ed, principally. He was from the East Coast, and we got along fabulously as individuals, but we couldn't agree on almost anything, basically. And it was one of those, it just everything he wanted to do was so complicated to try to get space efficiencies in the building, that, and knowing state budgets, that things break and they're hard to get fixed and stuff like that. So it's like, that was and also really trying to press on assumptions. This particular space planner really felt like students were connected to our student union in Vermillion, that the students would study over there and not in the library. And it's like, no, students are pretty agnostic. They kind of study all over the place, you know, basically, in terms of their space. And so I had to come to meeting after meeting with data. I was always asking my team to give me more data on how the building is being used and so on and so forth. And so data is essential, both in kind of positive and trying to inform your project. It's also important if you're kind of trying to make sure the project stays on the rails, from your perspective. The one thing, I think I may have one more renovation project in my career. And as I've been thinking about that for the past year or so, if there's anything I can do, is that we actually build, whether it's a library space planner or just a really good facilitator, to build that into the project budget at the very beginning to get all that user input. It's really hard sometimes for us as the library administrator to be as neutral as you kind of need to be when you're just trying to gather all that data. And sometimes you get in meetings where people want you to give them answers and you're just trying to listen. And so, whether it's just a really good facilitator or maybe like a library space planner, if you can build it into your budget and process up at the front to kind of bring that in, the community study concept, informal, formal, I think that's really important. And again, in terms of kind of building allies and partners as you kind of move through the process of funding and execution. I'll
All
throw in,
right. Oh,
I'll
go
kind of
ahead.
throw in
Go ahead.
one
Dave.
really
Yep.
practical, maybe the words of wisdom from an unexpected place. And Terry hit on this, is like libraries are opportunities for architects to really build beautiful spaces, if depending on what you're kind of doing with your budget and stuff like that. And I remember our head of facilities on a project, we wanted this fantastic tower, and he was like, who's going to go up there and change those light bulbs? So it's just like, think about those more so listen to the people who think about those kinds of things, I guess, would be just a pithy piece of advice.
No, not pithy at all. I think these are all really great tips. Betty, you want to wrap up this section? And then we do have a few questions in chat I want to get to.
Well, Dan mentioned it earlier about the people that are on your committee and the talents that they have brought with them, and to use those people and others outside your committee, who can do this job for us? Who knows how to build shelves? Who knows, how to arrange open spaces and such things like that? Because they're there in our community. We just need to know, and in a small town, it's easier to know who those people are. They have the talents, and they're probably easier in a bigger town because you've got more to choose from. But we try to keep all of our things that we had, jobs, different parts of the building and stuff like that. We try to keep that local as much as we could. And that works pretty good to a point. Sometimes they're so such little businesses that they don't really have time to do a big project like building all the shelves in the library. But we got them, and we had good luck with them. So I think that showed the community that we're going to be putting our money back into our community. And I think that was a selling point there. And then we also had a well-respected doctor on our library board, and he managed all of our money for us. And so that really made a big difference too, because that took the pressure off and me as the president have to worry about the money, because he did a wonderful job on that. And when people saw that he was on our library board, it made it a little bit more prestigious. It wasn't just a bunch of people from Kennebec that got asked to be on the board. It was an important person from Kennebec. Also, we encouraged our clubs, our local clubs, to take the library on as a project, whether it was to give a donation or to help earn some money for it. Well, our women's club took it on as their project for their club. That is the basis of why they're in in the organized club. And so they became very much more involved with summer reading programs, activities with the kids, you know, like after school activities. We started actually an after school project, and we didn't get any money from anybody. We just, you know, did it ourselves through the library and the city. Just making sure that everything happens. We had Mother's Day teas and those kinds of things. So it pulled people into our building who maybe had never seen it before. And they're all there. They usually are saying, wow, we didn't know that this library was this nice. We have chair yoga. The library's not open in the mornings. And so we have chair yoga in the mornings. And that
okay. Sorry, Betty, I'm going to have to,
okay.
I'm going to cut you off there. I do want to just get to a couple questions that we had in chat, and panelists, thank you for putting a lot of good tips and tricks in the chat. There was one question, I believe it was from Madison, advice on should she do little piecemeal remodeling projects. It sounds like they really need to do a big overhaul, but advice from any of you panelists, smaller projects or just go whole hog?
It's very possible to do smaller projects piecemeal, but don't do them without a bigger comprehensive plan that you can do in modules or stages. Otherwise, you're going to find out that by the time you get one piece done and then another piece done, the next piece doesn't fit in with anything like that. So make sure you have a really comprehensive overall plan before you start picking off little pieces.
Other panelists anything to jump in on there?
I agree. That's all. I echo that, you know,
Okay.
have your long-term vision in mind for where you want to be. And in anything you do, try to make sure you have flexibility. And don't forget as you rearrange or do anything to make sure you're following ADA and stuff. If you have to just take a stick, that's that 42 inches. So you walk between to make sure that you are remembering. Even if you don't have any customers who are currently using a wheelchair, all of that makes it much easier for everyone who uses it if you're following those standards.
Good advice there. And there was also a question about grants in the chat. Did any of you receive grants? I know there's a lot of community development block grants, things like that. Any of the panelists, if you'd like to jump in and share your experience.
Brenda, I don't remember where the State Library is with the Foundation Center collection. If you still have it or if you discontinued it.
We discontinued it, yes. Okay. So we do not have that anymore.
Jody might have it at Siouxland, I'm not sure. No.
Yeah. We don't have a foundation, but we do get some grants through the Sioux Falls Area Community Foundation.
No, I mean the Foundation Center collection where you can do research to find grants.
Yeah, no.
Okay. We do still have it, but it is very proprietary from the Foundation Center. So you actually have to come to our building to use it. That's the only drawback.
Other grant ideas from folks? I know there's a lot of small foundations out there, community foundations. There are grants available through the state. Like I mentioned, some of the regions have different grant availability.
We've gotten some decent size, you know, like the 25,000 from like Sioux Valley Energy, you know, so don't forget your co-ops that are supporting your community already. They're a great spot to tap into. They might help provide all of your furniture or all of your shelving, you know, if you can break down some of those costs. Sometimes people like to donate to a specific item.
And is it Dollar Tree or Dollar General that has literacy focused grants? So if you have one of those businesses in your community or nearby, you might be within their funding area.
Yes, very good. All right, folks, we are at 10:59. If anybody, any of the attendees have a real quick question that you want to jump in on, feel free. Otherwise, will go ahead and wrap this up. I put the link to the survey in the chat again, so if you wouldn't mind filling that out. And as I mentioned, this has been recorded, so we will have the recording available if you want to share it with your library board trustees or anyone else. That would be helpful. So hopefully you've all gained a lot of great information today.
Thank you. I do have one piece that I just shared with our city council because they wanted to know the effect of library buildings and on your community. And there was a study that came out in either 18 or 19 out of the Chicago area that shows that a capital project for a library, building a library, will affect the reading scores in your school district for 10 years. So good job, keep having those buildings, but that is pretty significant because we need our kids to be able to read. And we matter.
That's a good point too, is and Dan mentioned it and the rest of the panelists, have your data, do your research, have those facts and figures for the people who are going to be asking for them. So again, thank you so much, panelists. We had a wide range of people with a wide range of experiences, and I think this was great. And if folks have questions, you can send them to me and I can connect you with a panelist in particular if you'd like, but we will go ahead and stop the recording and wrap this up for today. And thank you all again very much. It's great information.